for me, PE needs to have the same status as literacy and numeracy, and physical literacy needs to have the same status as literacy and numeracy. It's healthy mind, body, spirit. If that works for the Olympics, it can work for school.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast, and today we speak to the global ambassador of sport, who's broke 30 world records, won 6 London marathons, competed in 5 Olympic Games, and won 11 Paralympic gold medals. Off the track, she's using her experience as a crossbench peer in the House of Lords. In our conversation today, we talk about sports, business, politics, and the opportunities for the fitness industry post-COVID. I think you'll really enjoy this episode with Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson. So Tanni, thank you so much for joining us today. Where are you locked down at the moment?
I'm locked down in the northeast of England, in a tiny little town where I live, which is quite near the northeast coast and the North Sea. So for our summer, it's still pretty cold at the moment. But the good stuff I take out of where we are now is that this is the longest I've been home in 20 years. I normally spend a huge amount of time traveling. So in this very weird times, I'm actually quite enjoying being at home with my family, but probably best not to ask them because they might not be quite so happy that I've been home for so long.
So how are you managing to do what you do from home? Has it been sort of fairly easy transition? Have you enjoyed it?
The transition's been fine. I mean, I'm sort of like an early adopter of all sorts of different technology. So, when I was an athlete, I had a heart rate monitor, really early on, and, tracking devices and all these different things. So for me, it's definitely changed how I work in that actually I have more time to work. And the temptation of working from home is that you can do a lot of extra hours. And I'm sort of trying to balance myself for whenever we come out of lockdown. But it's actually for an awful lot of people, it's been really hard, working from home if you've got children. Luckily my daughter's 18, so, she's really self-sufficient. But for a lot of people, the social and physical isolation's been really difficult, not least in, the space of, people trying to be physically active. They're doing lots of different things from what they normally do. So on my daily sort of time out, it's been amazing seeing the number of people riding bikes who have never been on their bike before. So I've now taken spanners out with me and shouting at people how to adjust the bike to get the seat height right. So my husband's a cyclist. So that's kind of our little bit of giving back, is just shouting, put your bike seat up 2 inches and you'll find it easier. So it's all just really strange at the moment. And it's going to be like this for, many more weeks. Yeah,
that's right. It's an interesting time. I guess, what you mentioned about getting a lot of stuff done. I think that's one of the things I have found. I'm like you, I'm sort of, most weeks I'm on the road, on a plane traveling, and it's amazing how sort of efficient you can be when you're just focused. And I guess travel takes a lot out of you, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And it's good. I mean, I've got the least number of emails in my inbox I've ever had. But I do miss, the contact with people, the work I do now. A lot of the work I do can be bumping into people in the corridor in Parliament, and you can bring a huge amount of change in informal situations. And it is a bit, I'm spending so much time online. Actually being online all the time is really exhausting. So I'm trying to balance how much time I spend, in sort of online meetings every day, because that's hard. But, what I'm trying to do with all the different roles I have is we actually need to find the capacity where we are now to think about the good stuff that we're doing. And for disabled people, working from home, the technology we're now using has been great. For people who want flexible work, and we've got to find ways to keep the good stuff when we are actually allowed out again, and not go back to some of our traditional, not terribly effective ways of working.
Yeah, we were having a conversation just the other day about plans for getting back to work. We've got a lot of people in England, and we were talking about the same thing. It's like, well, look, should we just kind of look at? There's obviously some stuff that's probably not been good, but what are the things that have worked well? A lot of people are very effective from working at home. They're an hour commute each way, and the stress of that commute, and the extra time that they could be doing other things. I suppose. I'd be interested to see what you thought. But do you think in terms of working conditions that there are probably some benefits that probably could be taken forward, in terms of traditional company structures where everybody has to go into an office every day, 9 to 5.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the number of desk spaces we're going to need in the future, I think, is going to change. If you work in the big cities, I mean, commuting an hour and a half each way in and out of London is just the norm for a lot of people. I've got a colleague who commutes over 2 hours each way every single day, who has suddenly said, why am I doing this? And it's like, well, I was telling you that before. And, there's a lot of talk in work in the last sort of couple of years about presenteeism and bringing your whole self to work, and, people feeling that you can contribute when you're in work because there's other things going on in your life. And I think we've thrown that presenteeism on its head that, I've got every platform going, but for a lot of things, the platforms can work, if you're disciplined and, I think especially if you know people, the platforms can work quite well. So, we don't have to be rushing around in the same way. So yeah, I hope we do think differently about it. And, I've always felt, I live 300 miles north of London, which in US terms is nothing, but, I travel to London 49 weeks of the year, because that's where I think I have to be. And actually, I don't need to do that. So I think, I'll be thinking really differently about what my life's going to be. And if it hadn't have been for this, I wouldn't have challenged some of those things for myself. So, it's going to be, I was going to say I'm quite excited, but, I think there are a lot of good things that can come out of this.
Oh, you, from what I've read up on you, you seem to be a person that challenges norms and doesn't go with the flow. Is that something that you developed when you were, as a younger athlete and brought some of those things into business?
I think as an athlete, you've got to challenge yourself all the time, because you've got to be better every week, every month, every season. You've got to be better, faster, stronger. You've got to have your world rankings. You've got to have you hit your time targets. I did track and road racing. So I think, and you've got to find solutions to everything, so, if a piece of equipment's not working properly, you've got to find a way to fix it. If your training's not going right, you need to evaluate it and find a way to. So I think for me, and that's partly my upbringing as well, my parents were very sort of solution focused. So I think that helps, that the solution to an issue is not often the one that you'd like, or not often the easiest route. So you've got to find lots of different ways to move forward. So I think a lot of the skills that I learned from being an athlete transfer into the business world, because actually in sport, training's really boring. It's very repetitive. It's a means to an end. We were training 12 to 15 times a week. I mean, I love training 8 times a week, but 15 times a week was, you eat, you sleep, you train, and then you do it again. But you do it because you've got this moment to compete and race and be against other people. And work's a bit like that. You have to do lots of really dull, boring stuff to get to the point where you can produce a report or make a sale or do something that is important for the business. So I think that's a really useful skill I learned through sport, was you've got to do the hard graft. If I work in politics now, you have to spend a lot of time writing speeches, because the way our parliament works, you might have 2 minutes. That is your time that you've got in the chamber to make a difference. And so, you can't do it on a wing and a prayer. You have to prepare and plan and, maximize those 2 minutes that you've got. So, I think there's been a lot of stuff that's been useful from one life that's led into the other.
You talk about, I've listened up on a lot of interviews you've done, and you use the word time quite a lot. And sort of, I guess the analogy of the amount of training you do, and then through your 5 Olympic Games you did, the amount of minutes that you're actually performing.
Yeah.
Is where did that sort of appreciation of time and effectiveness come from?
I think some of it was from my father, who was amazing in terms of fighting to get me into, good education. And I was born with spina bifida. I was paralysed at a very young age. And he was sort of very keen on saying you've got a limited time to achieve. And then it was after my second Paralympics. So I was 23. And I remember coming home and just thinking, I wonder how long I've been on the track at Paralympics at 2 games to win the medals that I had at that point, which at that point was 4 golds, a silver and a bronze. And it's like, oh gosh, that's not very long. And how long have I been training? And by that point, I've been training for 10 years. And it's like, right, okay, if I'm going to do the next 4-year cycle, okay, I've got to really deliver. So my Paralympic career, 5 games, 16 medals, is 19 and a half minutes. But I mean, if you added in every other race I did, which was, London Marathon, Boston, LA, Heidelberg, if I added in all the track, that would water it down. The stuff that was really important to me was Paralympics. And so that's the thing that made me go out through the door every day when it's freezing cold or snowing or, it's windy and I'm meant to be doing 20 miles training and you don't really want to. It's like, right, okay, I just need to get out and do it, and because if I don't do it today, you can't catch it up tomorrow. You can't just work through the night as an athlete. You've got to rest and you've got to eat properly. And so that for me was, so every games. So the idea actually was to keep that. I kind of had an idea I might be able to try and fit 5 games in based on, me being 19 at my first games. And kind of part of the idea was I wanted to keep that. If I could do all the distances I wanted to do, I wanted to try and keep that under 20 minutes because in sport, it's the least amount of time, that's important. So, I kind of, and my husband, who was my coach, would say that I should have been close, I should have been 19 minutes, not 19 and a half. But, that's another debate.
It's a hell of an achievement. And do you think a lot of that, I guess, sort of resilience in, because from what I've heard, you've had some great successes, but you've also lost a lot of races, and which must have meant you shaking yourself off and picking yourself back up again. Was a lot of that shaped by your parents or your father in particular?
Hugely shaped by my parents. So both my parents were only children. In different ways, that had restrictions on their upbringing. So my mum's parents were in their late 40s when they had her. She was a bit of a sort of a surprise baby. So she was almost brought up by parents who were kind of a grandparents' age. And my father was really sick when he was young, so wasn't allowed out and to play. And, so I think when my parents had me and my sister, they were very much keen on encouraging us to try lots of different things, do things differently. My dad and mum, they both loved sport. So, I was very much encouraged to do that. But Dad was like, well, how do you know you're going to like wheelchair racing unless you do it? How do you know if you're going to like? So he was very much, try loads of things because then you've got time to find what you like. And I'll be honest, I thought wheelchair racing was really dull and boring. But then I wasn't good at any other sport I played. I mean, I really wanted to play basketball, but, it wasn't great. And then I tried wheelchair racing. It was like, actually, this is quite cool. So I think for me, that was instilled from a young age that, don't sit on the sidelines and go, I don't want to do it. Do it from an informed position. So I didn't even realize they were teaching me some of this as I was growing up. Some of it you only realize much later on in life. But my parents were really keen on trying things. I remember there was one year I wanted to do 4 races in a week. And everyone told me I was stupid and shouldn't try it. And the only one who said you should do it was my dad. And okay, so the first race was in Toronto on the Saturday and Sunday. I was racing in Zurich in Switzerland on the Tuesday night, Aarhus in Denmark on the Thursday night, and Atlanta, the Peachtree 10K on the Saturday. And my dad just said, well, you've got a passport and a credit card. Give it a go. Like, what's the worst going to happen? You miss your flight. You have to pay, don't miss a flight because you'll have to buy a new flight. And that's quite expensive. So, it's like, what's the worst that could happen was I don't make my, so that kind of encouragement. I think as well, it was a lot of, face your fears, do things that scare you or challenge you. And another example, 2012 opening ceremony for the Paralympic Games. I got asked to fly in to the opening ceremony on a wire. And I'm scared of heights, like really don't like heights. And I remember going, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And then go, what are you doing? And then having a chat with the guy who was in charge of me, and I found out he was one of the most experienced wire guys in the world. And when I told him how scared I was, he just said to me, the night of the opening ceremony in the London Paralympics, we're not going to let you die. You go, okay, right, okay, I can do it. So, it's not without a lot of safety around and a lot of protection, but you've got to do things that challenge you. And in my career from the beginning to the end, I lost more races than I won. But people only remember the ones you win. I didn't win a race for the first 5 years I competed. So as a junior. So, I think for me as an individual, it's weighing up. Do you have Venn diagrams? I don't know whether this is a British thing that they teach in maths in school, where you have these circles that all interconnect. And I think, a lot of people on the outside just see me as an athlete then or as a politician now. But for me, I'm a combination. I'm a mum, I'm a wife, I'm a parliamentarian, I'm Welsh. And for me, it's not just being stuck in one image of me. It's understanding that there's lots of different parts that make up me and what I can do and what I can achieve.
I know you've, part of your career has been lobbying to improve transport access for people, with various disabilities and, access steps, that kind of thing. But I was interested to read that sort of when you was younger, that your parents did the opposite and didn't make it very easy. Is that true?
That's totally. So I became paralysed at the age of about 6. So what happened is I'm missing a number of vertebrae at the back of my spine. And then as I grew, my spine collapsed. So it's actually my own vertebra that severed my spinal cord and paralysed me. I could never walk very well at all, but that kind of paralysed me. And, I didn't miss a day of school. There wasn't any pain. It just happened really gradually over about 3 years. And my dad was an architect, and he knew how inaccessible the world was because he helped build it. Every building he was part of designing had steps because apparently they look pretty, and cobblestones and curbs and all this nonsense, which is rubbish if you're a wheelchair user. So he didn't want to make our house the only place I could live, and he refused to make it wheelchair accessible. So I used to have to get out of my chair and transfer through the front door and drag my chair in, and I used to crawl up and down the stairs to get to my bedroom. And actually, that was really good for me at that age, at that time. I wouldn't suggest that's probably good for everyone, but it was actually about 10 years ago. My dad was really ill, and we knew we didn't have much time left with him. And I kind of wanted to say thank you to him for some of those, because as a child, you never say thank you to your parents. And I just said to him about, some of these moments. I remember I was 7, and he showed me a book, had pictures of the Taj Mahal and the Sydney Opera House and these amazing buildings from around the world. And he was really fond of bridges as well. And he was like, right, you need to go and visit these places. And to do that, you need education, you need a good job. And I was like, wow, okay. And that had a huge influence on my sports career and my political career. So I sort of said to Dad, do you remember that conversation we had when you were 7? And I said, it changed my life. It made me believe that I could do stuff. And he was like, no, don't remember it. Oh, great. Okay, thanks. Lost the bonding moment. And it was like, okay, right. And about half an hour later, he said, oh, yeah, I do remember it. I was like, okay, a bit late now, Dad. Okay, fine. So I said, okay, yeah. And he said, your mum and I had been chatting, and you were quite an annoying child, and we didn't want you living at home forever. Oh, okay, thanks for that. So it probably wasn't, because my dad was quite sort of low key about these things, but I think there was an element of that. If you wrap your kids in cotton wool and you don't allow them to do anything, you've got to give them space within safety and parameters, but you've got to let kids try things, and that's what they let me do.
What do you think about that? I guess nowadays you can, with everything that happens in the world and everything seems to be dangerous, and you can wrap, your children and society in cotton wool. And I suppose in some ways that takes away a lot of what you built up, which is, strength to deal with difficult situations, which I guess in life we're all going to, as your father said, there's going to be steps. So, learn how to deal with them. What's your views on that as, for bringing up children, or even, for sort of developing younger people?
You see, now as a mum, I have a totally different view on it, because it's like, really? I say to my daughter, like, ring me when you get there, ring me when you're coming home. And she's like, Mum, can you just, and I'm like, I know. No, so we try with our daughter to try and, give her space to learn and to try things. And, the sport she does is canoeing and kayaking. And we did leave her at a training camp, at the age of 12, when there were kids who were 20 who had their parents that, and again, a very protected, very safe environment, but she had to be there all week and cook for herself and get herself on and off the water, because we couldn't physically be with her because we were my husband was coaching abroad and I had stuff in Parliament I had to be there for. So we do try really hard to let Karis learn, because how can she measure her own safety unless she's had experience? But it's really hard as a mum. I mean, her plan this summer, she was going to go traveling through Europe with, her best friend for 2.5, 3 months. And I was like, oh my God, can I go with her? Can I follow? And my husband was like, you were traveling the world on your own at 17. It's like, yeah, I know. But
it's different.
Yeah, it's different. But it's different. So yeah, you've got to try and let them go. And it's not easy. It's really not.
No, definitely. So going back to your career as an athlete, what was one of your most memorable wins that you had, and why was it memorable?
My last Paralympics, which was Athens 2004, I knew that was my last games going into it. I knew that I was probably only going to compete for another season if I was lucky, and I sort of just about did 2 seasons after that before being completely broken. And it was winning the 100 meters, which was my weakest event, most pressure on me. And it was a memorable win because I'd lost my 800 2 days before, which was my strongest event. And which I've been unbeaten for in a few years, and I was the Paralympic and world record holder, and all these things. And I made a split-second decision, which was the wrong one, and I put myself at the back of a pack. And in an 800 meters, that's really not a good place to be. And you can see, actually, if you watch the video, you can see the point I made the decision. So the race plan was to go to the front, time trial it, try and take the speed out of the other athletes and try and take the kick out of them. And basically that was the only way I was ever going to win. And you can see the point I made the decision to do something else. I have no idea why I didn't make that decision. So yeah, coming back. And what was hard was that everyone goes to try and do their best, and every athlete has huge ups and downs in a career. And if you win at a games, your teammates, if you're lucky, will just go, it's all right. Well done. You queue for the bus, you queue for your food, yeah, you're on the medal, but your mates on the team don't treat you any different. You don't go back into the village with everyone going, oh, well done, you're amazing. It's like, you're right, yeah. What I found really hard was going back into the village and people just coming up and hugging me and saying, you okay? And that was happening because I've been around a long time. I know a lot of the athletes from different sports. The men's GB basketball team, and quite big, tough guys. A couple of those guys just came up and slapped me on the back and said, "What was that?" Yeah, I know, don't know. And that was the hardest bit to deal with, knowing that I'd kind of disappointed people and people's kindness. And that sounds really weird, but that was hard. But coming back and winning the 100 was amazing. And there's a picture of me as I crossed the line where I'm just, it's probably technically the best race of my life, actually, in terms of start to finish. Everything was just, every segment of the race was right, and that doesn't happen very often in your career. So for me, that was quite, if I had to pick one medal, it would be that. But there's a little bit, you couldn't have had the joy of the 100 without the huge disappointment of the 800. And although that was bad, I can't change it. I mean, I can't regret it. Actually, what I learned was one bad race doesn't make you a bad athlete. It just, it was miserable. I mean, it's really miserable, but I can't change it, so move on.
Yeah. What's your view on losing, I guess, and that's in general terms, I guess, being an athlete, or whether you're in Parliament and you lose a vote or something, how do you look at it and cope with it when it hasn't gone as you'd planned?
I think it's interesting because it's sort of winning and losing to most of the world is winning's there, losing's there. But actually there's this sort of continuum and all the way in between. You can not win a race when you've had the most perfect day that you ever could have had. You did everything right. You made good decisions. You can win when you're not the best in the pack, but because someone else screwed up, and so if you ask me my top 10 races, they wouldn't be necessarily races that I've won, but the medal table is based on gold medals, and that's it. And a silver only counts if there's a tie for bronze, and a bronze only counts if there's a tie for gold and silver. So for me, you can't just come away from a race where you've won and go, yeah, it was amazing. You've still got to evaluate it. And you can't come a race from when you lost and go, I was a disaster. You have to evaluate. So that's, I think, what I was quite good at doing as an athlete as well, is that you pick it apart. You look at what you did well, what you could do better. And it's the same now in politics. If I make a speech, I try and think, okay, what could have been better? Where did I lose the thread? Where did I make the most impact? And also in the work I do now, I can win a vote in the House of Lords, which is our upper chamber, but when it gets sent back to the House of Commons, our lower chamber, it could get overturned. So winning a vote is not always necessarily the best thing for the legislation that I'm trying to change. Sometimes it's best to not vote and take half of what you want from the government and move on. So yeah, it's like the winning and losing is always fascinating because it's so much more complicated than that. And I'm great. I'm very, very lucky. I've got a group of critical friends. Actually, some of them, they were my training partners, and some other people who watched me in Parliament and will watch my debates, and they'll, ring and say, God, that was boring. What, or that was good, or don't wear that colour jacket again because, it makes you look ill, or brush your hair. But, feedback. And I think as an athlete, you learn to accept critical feedback because you have to. The feedback you get as an athlete is pretty tough. Well, it's tough because you've got a clock and you've got a finish line. So, it's me. Yeah. And so, I'm very lucky that I have people around who are able to give me feedback. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't always take it very well. I mean, I try to, but, but actually, usually after you kind of think, oh, okay, that was fair, So I think it's really important that you have people around you who will be that critical friend, who will just say, that was a bit dull, and so, it's important to have that, because if you want to be better next time, you need more than your own view, because I'm hyper critical of myself. And so, I need somebody to say, actually, do you know what, that wasn't as bad as you thought it was. Or actually, if somebody says to me that was as bad as you thought it was, it's like, okay, right, build it back up from the bottom again, so but I think it's how you learn about yourself to understand how you take criticism, how you deal with it. It's how you deal with all those different things. You've got to learn a lot about yourself, and in sport it teaches you that, because if you can't learn to deal with that, then it's really hard to make it as an athlete.
I guess it must be difficult as well when you're in the limelight, and there's a lot of people who've got views, whether that's in in public or as an athlete. There must be a lot of people that have got their own views. How do you sort of I guess measure yourself without getting too consumed with what's in the newspaper or what people are saying to you? How do you sort of keep that balance and measure your own success, and maybe not just being about the medal, for example?
I mean, it's not always easy if you're if you're getting a barrage of people saying that they think you're awful or you're not doing a good job. And I've had it in times in my political career where for something that I've done, people have really gone for me, and that's hard, because it's hard to switch off from that. But it's about trying to sort of find balance. I mean, some of the funny stuff that I get is, people stopping me in the street saying, you're that athlete, aren't you? You go, oh, I retired 13 years ago, but yes, and they're like, oh, you're not as skinny as you used to be. Because I'm not training. And okay, what you can't say ever, I'm not training 15 times a week anymore, so I don't need to have like zero body fat. And, and so what you just have to go, yeah, I know, but, yeah. And some of it's really funny. Yeah. And some of it, when people come up and, I've had people really swear at me in the street and say, you're a really bad person because you voted this way. And, and that's, it's not, I guess you just have to try and, think you're doing the right thing. And the decisions we make in politics, people will both love you and hate you for those decisions. And, most of us want to be liked, and it's hard. But I think, what I always say, maybe how I vote in Parliament, I always, if I can't describe in 5 sentences why I voted a certain way, I shouldn't vote on that topic. I mean, actually, no one ever asks me why I vote a certain way. They'd be much more confrontational. But I think you have to understand, and be able to explain to people. So when people say, why did you do that? You have to give them the time to explain to them why you've done those things. And sometimes they understand it and sometimes they don't. And the reality is you can't, in the job I do now, not everybody will love you for what you do. So sometimes it's okay and sometimes it's not. I mean, I think some of the hardest stuff I dealt with was actually when I was pregnant. I had a lot of people saying to me that, people like you shouldn't be pregnant, meaning disabled women. And some of that was quite hard to deal with. But then I kind of have a good family around me who just, support me and, help me through that. So probably the discrimination I experience as a disabled person is probably some of the toughest stuff to deal with, because it's usually people like you, and it comes with the pointy finger. So my defense, when people actually mean people like you, as in disabled people, shouldn't be allowed to do these things. So, before lockdown, I was told that people like me shouldn't try and commute at busy times because non-disabled people have jobs they're trying to get to. Go, yeah, that's what I'm doing. And so my response is, because I'm from Wales, which is one of the 4 home countries of the United Kingdom, I just say, what do you mean, Welsh people? Or do you mean wheelchair user? And that normally stops people and gets them to think a little bit. I mean, that's been rehearsed over many years, but it's finding a way you can challenge people without losing your temper and screaming at them, which might make me feel better for about 2 minutes, but actually doesn't change their attitude. And I have to, there are times when I do shout back at people, but, what I try to do is try and shift people's view of what disabled people can and can't do. And most of the time, a lot of people aren't used to talking to disabled people or, know what to say. And it's about trying to change those attitudes. I've lost count of how many times I've been asked, how did you get pregnant? Well, you have a mummy and a daddy who love each other very much. And you're like, how do you think? Anyway, yeah. So, actually what sport again teaches you, you get asked the same questions all the time. You're happy when you said you lost. You just get used to, you get better at dealing with those things the more it happens to you. So experience and failure and doing things again or doing things differently, you get better at it because you have lots of practice of failure. I've had loads of practice at failing at all sorts of things. So that means you can be better at when things go the right way.
Do people come up to you and say like that you don't know and say things like that, or are these people that you know?
No, complete strangers. I remember traveling with my daughter on a plane when she was about 2, and I recognise as a wheelchair user, if something happens to the plane, I'm not getting off. That's the reality. And so from her being really young, we taught her, what to do with the face mask and things like that. And I got on this one plane, and one of the cabin crew said, well, we don't travel with babies on the road. Who put the baby on? And it's like, well, it's mine. No, who's the responsible person traveling with the baby? It's me. No, where's the mother or father? Well, that's me, I'm the mother. No, where's the mother? I'm the mother, that's my child. And they then said, oh, well, you're not responsible. So we went through this thing with like, Harris, how'd you put your face mask on? So she, at 2, she was like, where are the nearest exits? She was like, and so in the end, some complete and utter stranger, fair play to him, overheard this conversation. He was fuming how I was being treated. And he just said, I'll be responsible for the child. So some bloke I'd never met before, the only way I was allowed to fly was if he said he would be the responsible adult to travel with her. And then he got off the plane and basically, we got to where we were going. You don't want to be chucked off beforehand, and made, some really high level complaints. So it's that kind of thing that happens, which is just a bit annoying, because actually, to be honest, there's lots of things where I'm probably not terribly responsible, but, I'm not irresponsible, but we joke about it, from Karis being little, it's like, okay, you need to learn to make food and you need to do this for yourself and make your bed learn to look after yourself. So it's interesting people's perception of what you can be as a disabled person.
When you're in the in politics, I guess, and you have to make a decision on standing on one side or the other, and as you say, it probably upsets people. Well, it's going to upset somebody. You can see that certainly a lot with what we're going through at the moment. But do you personally, do you have to kind of spend some time with that position? And, sometimes can you get, if you're going into a new area, can you sometimes, do you allow yourself to be exposed to think, well, I've got my view, but I'm open to listen? Or do you, when you're in this type of role, it's like, no, I'm going to have to think this through. I'm going to have to be confident, and I'm not going to be swayed from this opinion that I'm going to be talking about.
I mean, even things that I think I have a pretty fixed opinion on, I always try to listen to other views, because I think it's always important to be challenged and to get to a point where you think, okay, do I still think the same way? Because my views over things have changed over the years, and sometimes change in a much shorter space of time. So I think it is important to be challenged. So, on things like social media, I mean, unless someone is very offensive to me, I don't block them or, mute them, because it's, it's important to keep your mind open. I mean, we have huge amounts of paperwork that you have to read through. I don't vote on every single thing in the chamber, because, do you know what? If there's stuff that I just don't know about, I think I have to use my vote quite carefully, because if I vote one way or the other and it sways the vote, that changes legislation. So if it's something I really don't know about, or something where, I'm just right on the edge and don't quite know whether it's that way or that way is the best thing to do, I don't vote. But I try and vote as much as I can. But it does mean reading lots. I mean, actually, do you know what? The best thing I ever learned at university was just a speed read. And that's, I did a politics degree. So I think, the ability to take in huge amounts of information, I mean, I probably forget it 2 hours later, but to be able to assimilate information and make decisions is quite, but also having the confidence to say, do you know what? I'm not voting on this because I don't feel I know enough about it. Because it'd be really easy to go around, we still leave the chamber and go down one corridor or the other to vote. And it's having the confidence to say, do you know what, on this, I'm not an expert, I'm not doing it. And I think that's important too, because I have to live up to the things that I vote on.
What about realizing that you've made a wrong decision? I guess in politics in general, is that something that, because my view is that, once you made a decision for a number of reasons, it's not easy to go back, even if it's the wrong one, because there's so much invested in that. A number of things come to mind. But from your view, being good at that role in government, for example, should you, if you realize you made a wrong decision, do you come out and say, look, actually, I've what I know now is different, and I've got that wrong, and I've changed it? Or generally, does that not happen very often?
So I think the House of Lords is quite interesting on lots of levels, because we're nominated, we're not elected, so we're there for life. And I mean, there's good and bad that comes with that, but it's based on coming with experience. So I got put in because of my experience in sport and physical activity and disability rights, and those are the things that I mostly work on. But what you do get, because the political, and we also in Parliament have about 170 who are independents, who aren't a member of a political party. So I'm one of those. And so because you can't be threatened by the political party, vote this way or say this, or we won't let you be elected next time, or we won't support you in your next election, because we don't have that. We have a lot of freedom to say what you want to say. And so one of the weird things is, which I never expected when I went in there, was that if you sit and listen to a debate, people do stand up and say, look, when I came in to the debate, I thought I was going to vote this way. Actually, I'm now going to vote that way. So I think we do have that freedom. And that, do you know what? It's really interesting, because it'd be great if we all had that freedom in the outside world to be able to say, do you know what, I've changed my mind. Because sometimes there's so much pressure to not change your mind, and you're going down a route that's not the right one, but you can't, because that's sometimes sort of seen as weakness, where actually it doesn't have to be weakness. It can be a sign of strength to say, do you know what, we need to do something. So it's weird. I mean, the House of Lords is not the real world on so many levels, but also it's a place where you could also stand up and say what you think, and that's And you might have every other person in the chamber that disagrees with you, but you're allowed to speak. There are rules as well, because there are ways that you can tell someone to sit down and be quiet if they're rude or offensive, or, we have a lot of rules on being polite in the chamber. But you have the right to say what you think. And that's really powerful, because there's lots of places. I mean, I've sat on lots of things on the outside world where you think, oh, I better not quite say what I think, because it's quite, it goes against what everyone else in the room's saying, or, it's people won't like me if I say that. So having a bit more of that in the outside world, I think, will be really powerful. That freedom to be able to give a true and honest opinion within rules.
You must, you must meet some amazing people in that area. Are there any sort of leaders that stand out, and what do you think makes a really good leader?
The best leaders I've seen are the people who aren't afraid to have really good people around them. And that's really powerful, I think, as well, because I've seen people who think that they have to be the most educated, brightest, smartest person in the room. And if they lead, everyone underneath, needs to just listen to what they say. The really great people I've seen are willing to listen to other people's opinions, are willing to be challenged, and give people the space and the breadth to be able to just do the things they're good at. And that two-way trust is really important to have. And, recognizing that, not everyone's going to be brilliant at everything. I kind of think it's a bit like a jigsaw. Everyone brings different strengths. And the best people I've seen are the people who, you would stand behind and, do what you're asked. I think we had that in the leadership for the Olympic and Paralympic Games, and I've seen it in other, places as well, where, you all understand what you're trying to do. And sometimes, everyone's busy and doing a million things, and it's really easy to, go down a track where you don't quite understand what's going on and what you're meant to be doing. Somebody who really sets really clear goals and targets, but also is willing to listen to other people's opinions. And I'm very lucky that, I get to work with a lot of people who are really clear in what they're trying to do. And that also just makes it, challenging, difficult, but also fun. And, in the House of Lords, I've worked with amazing people. He's sadly passed away now, but his peer, Lord Joffe, and he's the lawyer that pretty much single-handedly got Nelson Mandela off the death penalty, and then had to flee South Africa with his family, and he ends up in the House of Lords. And politically, we didn't agree on a lot of things, but, when you have somebody who has done that, you think, okay, do you know what? I might not agree with you, but, I'll work with you. And, there's so many people in the Lords who come with that kind of background that it's a fascinating place to be.
And for those of you, for those people who are listening that don't fully understand, like I put myself in that category. What is the main purpose of the House of Lords?
That's a really good question. So, like many countries, we have two chambers. The lower chamber is the House of Commons. The upper chamber, which is the equivalent to the Senate, is the House of Lords. And our job is to not try and run the country, because we're not elected. We're not there to steal power off any government. We're there to be a check and balance. So we're the teachers that mark the homework of the Commons, who are the people. So our job is to say to the government of the day, are you really sure this is what you want to do? Do you want to have another think about it? So there are some things we can only send back 3 times. There are some things we can send back till we're bored. But basically, whatever comes through has to be agreed through both chambers. And you know what? We're really careful how we use that power. So a couple of years ago, we voted on something and threw it back to the Commons. And there was lots of people kicking off saying we'd sort of gone beyond what we were legally entitled to do. We have loads of lawyers. And actually, we were just using a bit of our power that we hadn't used for 370 something years. So, we're really conscious. We are not there to run. We're just there to say, have another think. Because based on our experience, have another think. So that's good. But that comes with a lot of responsibility. But we try and be really careful about how we throw stuff back to the Commons.
I've listened to you saying that politics is for losers. What caused you to change your mind?
Oh, so this is what I said when I was 21. And I was just coming towards the end of my degree. So I did a degree in politics and social administration at Loughborough University, which was, a great place to train and be, it's still, a fantastic university for sport. And my head of department asked me what I was going to do once I graduated. And everyone else from my year was going to work in politics, and I was going off to be an athlete. And he said to me, "Oh, you're not going to work in politics?" And I was like, "No, politics is for losers. I'm not doing that." And 18 and a half years later, I ended up working in politics. So it was actually my head of department sent me an email, which was kind of like, "Loser, no. I don't know if that's a thing outside the UK, but it was like, so yeah, what you say sometimes comes back to bite you. So obviously I don't think that now. Yeah, it was really funny. Out of everything I ever said to my head of department, that's the one thing he remembered.
Yeah, very. I guess that's an example of where you can change your mind if you don't get something right, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So in terms of what's happening in the world today, we're in the middle of this pandemic, and it's been interesting, I guess, to sort of watch it from both sides of the world. But one of the things that seems to be very apparent is the is the fact that if you're healthy and you've got a decent immune system, then whether it's COVID or anything else, you're in a very good position to deal with whatever comes your way, and I guess as a result, that puts a lot less pressure on the health service of the world, which I guess was people's concerns when this first came out, and then you kind of look at some of the figures. I sort of read up about it last night. In the UK, according to one of the government websites, there's about 64% of adults that are either overweight or obese in the United Kingdom, and children, about 40% of 10 to 11-year-olds are overweight or obese. That's children, and I guess looking at the percentage that governments are spending on preventative healthcare, but how much they're spending on treating people that have kind of gone through that. What's your views on that? Because it seems as though, in terms of focus, it seems as though there could be a little bit of requirement to adjust where we're spending our time. What's your views on that?
Well, for someone who spent quite a lot of time in the USA over the years, competing and with my family, it's interesting. So we were in Florida 2 years ago, and there were lots of older people exercising. And my daughter said to me, why do you see older people exercising out here and then we don't see it at home? And it's like, well, actually the weather's nicer. But also, we have a national health service that is free at the point of delivery, and they don't have that in the USA. And, actually the same sort of trip, she got taken ill with an ear infection, and we turn up at the hospital, and the first thing they do is run my credit card through to see what the limit is. And you go, wow, okay. And, and so, there's an element of that makes people put things off, they delay exercising. We have so much data that shows that exercise is good for so many different things, for type 2 diabetes, for, and those numbers are, just growing all the time. If you do have cancer or number of health conditions, being fit and healthy going into surgery, doing exercise helps you recover. There's just so much stuff. So I feel a bit like a broken record going on about how important exercise and diet is. But it's easier to write a prescription than it is to change somebody's habits. And people have to learn to take more personal responsibility for themselves and think about it. But that comes, we need to change our education system and make health and fitness more fun at primary school, for younger children below the age of 11. We have to think about how we deliver sport and competitive sport, and about, young women, what they want and how they feel comfortable, exercising. I mean, there's also, when I was growing up, people didn't eat out the way they do now. There's so much more choice of food and different things and distractions, and, we need to think a little bit about our own lives. but exercise is really important. One thing, that the research is coming through very strongly at the moment with COVID-19, that if you're obese, you are much more likely to get it. And, it's a really nasty, horrible, vile, condition, disease. It's just not a good, well, there's no good way to die, but, it's really not, you don't want to get it. Is that the else? It's not about trying to cure you, because once you've got it, it's really, really difficult to cure. So, we have to, and I think if we can, through what we're going through now, shift that debate even more to think about prevention rather than cure. We've got to push really hard on that. And we know with, British schools, children lose 80% of their fitness through the 6-week summer holidays. But during lockdown, children have already lost 39%. So they'll be going into the summer holidays, not going back to school, just losing more and more. And that affects children from poorer socioeconomic backgrounds more than middle class children or wealthier parents and families. So, we've got to change everything we do. And, that's kind of a big part of my job now, is to get people thinking differently about how they exercise, what they do, how they do it. And the good bit about now is that I have seen people, because we, for a long time, we're only allowed out for an hour a day. They're making the most of their hour a day. And we have to make sure they carry on, exercising. I mean, I have to say, to be fair to, the gym and leisure sector, they closed down as soon as they were told to, and they only want to open safely. I've not met a single owner, manager, CEO who's making any rash decisions right now. The sector has really come together to say, okay, on this we have to work together, and that's a really positive thing as well. But yeah, we just, as a nation, we like to think we're a nation of sports lovers. We're actually a nation that likes watching big sports events. We love watching the Olympics and Paralympics, and then we don't watch half those sports again for another 4 years. So, we have to change it and actually become a nation of people who love physical activity, not just who sit down and watch it on TV.
What do you think? Do you think the government will start looking at things differently? Because I suppose, and I don't understand how that whole thing works, but when you look at the amount of money that's spent, just dealing with, as you say, diabetes, heart disease, obesity, and it's going up, and as is the amount of the obesity rates in the UK and America for that fact. But do you think they're motivated now to kind of to try and do something? Because I guess as you say, you've got it. You really need to start with kids and right at the beginning, and I guess working with businesses and a number of different areas to get that done. But do you think the government are interested, or is that just sort of not really on their agenda?
I think what happens.
You've got to be careful with what you say, but
no, well, I think what happens is that most governments think in their parliamentary terms. So for us, it's 5 years. And they think about getting to the next election. The advantage of the House of Lords, because we're there for life, is that parliamentary terms don't matter to us. We can carry on working on projects and legislation, and we can keep going and keep pushing for change. So any government anywhere has the challenge of the next election, and if you don't get elected next time, you can't get a chance to get your views through. So we need to just be much better at effectively arguing for physical activity. When parties are putting their manifestos together, when they're thinking about change, but actually, if you could wave a magic wand, it's not one thing you need to change. When there are new housing developments being put up, we need to think about the built environment and what physical activity can be built into it, and where the bus stops are and where the public transport is. And so we need to. So my work on physical activity, I think people think it's just in the space of who uses gyms and leisure centres. Actually, it's in housing developments, it's in public transport, it's in physical activity goes across everything. And we just have to, any government, we just have to keep saying to them, you need to think about prevention rather than cure. Because what we know is our National Health Service is not sustainable in its current format, and COVID-19 has put it under huge pressure. And those pressures aren't going to get any less. So I still want the National Health Service free at the point of delivery, and to do that, we have to do something different. So one of the things I'm working on is social prescribing, which is working with our general practitioners to get them, instead of writing a prescription for medication, getting them to write a prescription for physical activity. But that's educating. Our doctors don't get a lot, when they're doing their medical exams, don't get a lot of instruction on how to prescribe physical activity. A lot of doctors and nurses are not the fittest and healthiest themselves because they work really long hours. So it's easier to write a prescription for medication than have a conversation about what motivates you. Why do you want to lose weight? Why do you want to be healthier? Why do you want to do something different? If you do this, the impact will be. It's easier to say take some pills. And actually for the individual, it's easier. It's easier to pop a pill than walk 5K a day.
What do you think about that? Because I know some people that have been in that world, sales reps in the pharmaceutical world, and very sophisticated business, very well trained, very good at educating people on how to do things. It's super slick, and the money that they have, and I understand how they lobby for different things. So it seems as though there's a lot of stuff set up in that, dealing with the cure of the problem, very well funded, sophisticated systems in there. And at the beginning, in the prevention, it's the kind of fitness people and the health, and people who understand that. Definitely not as slick, not as well funded. Do you think that it's kind of very easy to sort of to allow that to continue, but basically at the risk that we're never really going to get to this preventative part as we should do if we allow that to continue to, we can give you a pill for that, and make. Where do you sit on that one?
It's a really interesting one because, I think the UK is different to the USA in terms of like drugs reps, but we're kind of going in that direction. And the reality is, there is some medication that we absolutely need, if it's cancer or leukemia treatment, that's important stuff. And, ultimately these are businesses and they need to pay for their development and their research and development. So, it's a really difficult one. But I think for things like, type 2 diabetes, which is preventable for, a lot of people, then medication shouldn't be the first thing that we aim for. But, it's how you educate people. We've got a campaign in the UK, which is about eating 5 fruit and vegetables a day. Actually, what you should be doing is eating nearer 8 portions of fruit and veg a day. It's just when they set up the government campaign, they didn't think people would go for 8. They thought 5 was a number that people could just about, tolerate. So it's about educating people. I want to live a long and healthy life, but that's the bit that people will put off today what they think they can do tomorrow. So it's not an easy answer. There isn't an easy answer. So we have to be better as a sector at selling the advantages of physical activity. And if you get it, you get it. And if you don't, it's. So I think for me, a lot of it. I was an easy kid in school because I liked sport, and it was all right. It's finding the thing that connects with people that makes them realize this is important. And a lot of people get to their 60s and then start thinking, grandchildren, how they play with, they start thinking about activity. Actually, we know now from research that people hit frailty in their 40s, not in their 60s and 70s, and actually they don't need to hit genuine medical frailty till their 80s. And that is if you're physically active. So I don't know how you sell to a 14-year-old. You need to be active if you want to play with your grandchildren. But we need to find a way of doing that.
It certainly seems at school, like here, my children have been at school both in the UK and in the US. And just compared to when I used to, and I didn't used to like it, I remember running around fields doing cross country and stuff. There was always quite a bit of activity, albeit it wasn't great. But it seems as though that's also gone in schools now, and you got the parents that they have coming in teaching some sort of PE, which isn't really PE. Why don't you think that schools, because that seems to me a great place to start, getting kids understanding and having fun about moving, and getting them off the screens and why can't that? I'm not trying to probe you for all the answers, but why do you think that's not happening?
I think a lot more mums are working than when I was in school. It's about, you wanting to know where your kids are at the end of the school day. It's 39% of sports facilities in England are behind school gates, and they're shut for 6 weeks of the summer holidays. Just open the gates, let the kids, use the facilities and play. So there's lots of things. I think, teaching has changed a lot in the last few years. And I go to a load of schools, and there are some amazing schools out there, but also you don't need world-class facilities, but you need some kind of facilities that make it easier to participate. And it's all right for me as an athlete going out and training when it's 2 degrees, it's because that's my job. But, for a 12-year-old girl who doesn't think they like sport, it's not going to encourage you to do it. So actually around what girls are allowed to wear for PE, actually what sports clothes are available for women to wear, that if you're a larger size woman, your choice of what you can wear goes down considerably. And so actually quite a lot of the brands are now thinking about that, which is, they're doing it for their business, but, at least they're doing it. So I think there's loads of things that we need to do. It's actually, I think about
Sorry, go on.
Just actually, for me, PE needs to have the same status as literacy and numeracy, and physical literacy needs to have the same status as literacy and numeracy. It's healthy mind, body, spirit. If that works for the Olympics, it can work for school. You can't have, it has to be just treated seriously, not as something that sporty kids get to do. And if you're sporty, it's great. And if you're not sporty, don't worry. It needs to be, the physical activity needs to be the thing. And then if you want to go and play sport and be good at sport, brilliant. But if we're not teaching really good physical literacy to little ones, how to run, jump, throw, and all the other stuff, then they're not going to find this, everyone needs with someone a bit like my dad that just makes you do lots of different things until eventually you find the thing you quite like, and then you might stick at it. Yeah.
It also seems, I've read a bunch of stuff about children and, how, and I've tried since homeschooling, I've done the same. I've had my children doing a few minutes of burpees outside and that, because if I was teaching, I would do 10 minutes of exercise, then I'd get them to sit down in the class because they're all over the place, and so I suppose it seems as though, if you want to get them focused and concentrating, the connection between the mind and the body is very strong. And I suppose if they've not had a great diet, which most, people don't have, and then they're, maybe they've had a lot of sugar, and then they come into the classroom, and then you try and get them to focus. It's almost like an impossible task. So I do think that, that there's a lot of information out there about how those two things work together.
It doesn't need to be complicated.
No, that's right. Yeah, I like I say, just running up and down the stairs a few times with some burpees, and that does the trick.
Yeah.
But do you think sort of, where you obviously are involved in UK Active and which represents also a lot of the, fitness businesses and operators, do you think there's an opportunity to work with companies? And I know, there is a financial gain, but, so is there in the, in the sort of, the pharmaceutical industry, they're making money out of it as well. But I suppose, do you think there's a place for businesses to get involved in some way and help out with getting some of these things more prominent, particularly with what's going on at the moment where, like people working out and moving outdoors, and you talked about all the children that are going to be on holidays, we're dealing with that at the moment. Could that be something that we could do to make a difference, do you think?
I think big businesses are recognising, we've been talking for a couple of years about presenteeism and bringing your whole self to work. And, you can't work effectively if you've got loads of problems in your private life and, there's all these other things going on. So actually, all the working online we're doing at the moment proves you don't need to necessarily be present. So which is quite interesting. But, a lot of big companies are recognising they need to provide facilities on site and time in the day to be active. And that needs to come from the top. And some companies that I've seen where it works brilliantly, the CEO goes to the gym at 2:30 in the afternoon, and that gives permission for other people to say, right, that's my block in the day where I'm going to go to the gym. But yeah, I think it needs to come from all different angles. And we have something. So, we have National Fitness Day where, that's one day, but, our members open up their doors, they go into the community, they show the breadth of what's available. Because if you don't, go to the gym or leisure provision, you might not know what's there. And your view might be based on what it was like when you were in school 30 years ago, not what it's like now. And, I think a lot of the businesses are going to have to, they will be running differently because of social distancing and, the physical distancing and, how people work their way around the stations and what they're able and the size of classes. So, and we're not quite sure how long that's going to last. So it is an opportunity to show, I think, people what as a sector we can do in a different way, to get people thinking about their own physical activity. I mean, I really miss going to the gym. But and I can't wait to be able to do that. But there's lots of different things that you can do that complement it. And the stuff you're saying about kids, we've got something over here. The Daily Mile, the Golden Mile. There's loads of different versions where every day primary school children, so that's sort of 6 to 11-year-olds, run a mile before class, and they know that the kids behave better, they learn better. That's where it doesn't need to be and if you get that, then you are likely, more likely when you're older to go and find other provision and join a club and, go and find your nearest leisure provision and, go and do something. So, we need the members to be looking at every opportunity to think about how their business pivots. And some are great at doing that and some will struggle through this time. But, a lot of the people I'm speaking to are thinking really positively about how they can do that at this time.
And so I guess it does probably, it is a unique opportunity where I suppose health in general, as health and fitness is certainly on people's minds at the moment that wouldn't think about it for obvious reasons. What would you say then, if there was some low hanging fruit that let's talk about the sector and how they can work with different people. What would you say is some of the low hanging fruit then that we could people who are listening could just do something about, after listening to this, would you say, or what they could lobby or you probably got a better insight than most people.
Lobbying as a sector is really important because that's where you bring legislative changes. But I think also on a local level, it's people knowing what's behind those doors, and what's on offer. And that's not necessarily about advertising, but, it can be about open days. It's about doing community work. It's about going to schools. I think it's about, showing people what you can do. And I think there'll be a lot of people who have been exercising, who've never done it before, who, as we start approaching winter, may not want to be doing everything outside that they've done and will be looking for new ways. So we need to capitalize on those things. But I think wherever the sector can talk, and, the sector won't always agree with each other on issues and even sometimes big issues. But, a lot of the work I've been doing in the UK is, people know their nearest brands or, gyms, or they know what's around the corner, but actually understanding the size and scale of the sector, about how many people are employed, secondary spend, number of sites, square footage, all those things, that's not always understood. And I think that's where the sector can be, can do more in terms of, telling people what they do and impact. Data is everything, and showing the impact of physical activity in illness prevention is also really important. We've got a great, load of members who are good at sharing information, helping us get that data out, lobbying, meeting with us and members of Parliament and ministers who all really care. What I love about the sector is, it's a business for a lot of people, but they genuinely care about people being healthy and fit and enjoying themselves. And that's what makes it a really fun place to work, because people care a lot as well. And when we have to kind of keep spreading that message.
So a couple of questions then before we finish off. So if in terms of I suppose how do the channels work into, like, I'll talk about the UK mainly, but how do the channels work into being, getting this stuff on the agenda? Would it be through like UK Active that you're you represent, or is there is there other ways locally that we could sort of help people understand?
But we do it in lots of different ways. So we do it from, talking to ministers, talking to MPs. We do a lot of work on, members of parliament, telling them what's in their constituency, and taking MPs to events that happen with National Fitness Day and other events that we run through the year. It's about creating bespoke data, for each of the constituencies, which is, number of young people, that are losing levels of physical, whatever the data is making it matter to those individuals. We work with local government association, basically anyone who wants to listen to us, and lots of people who maybe didn't think they did, but then realize, it's quite, we spend a lot of time just telling the world what we do. And that's, pretty important to keep doing that. And then also to the public, we've got to make, as a sector, or businesses have to make a connection with the public, with individuals. So again, it's not one thing; it's lots and lots of different things.
Yeah, and in the UK, though, in terms of businesses communicating, the hub would be UK Active in England. Is that right?
Yeah. So we have a number. We have a CEOs forum. We have a number of different meetings and different levels of people who meet together, and for us it's about connections. It's about people feeling able to share what they can in that environment and talk. And the solutions won't just come from it. The solutions will come from lots of different places. That's what we try to do. The UK's relatively small, and actually as a sector there's a huge amount we can do to help people. We just need to make sure everyone knows what it is we can do.
Okay, so you definitely seem as though you're a dreamer with big dreams. What's one of the next dreams that you've not yet accomplished?
That might have actually got me lost for words. There's not one big thing that I'm aiming for. I mean, I think a lot of it is around just trying to get physical activity on individual people's agenda, getting them think differently about what they can do. And it'd be great if I could say there's one thing in my life that I want to aim for, but I don't think there is. I think it's about helping people to think differently about themselves. And actually that makes it harder because there's no end date to that. I can't say by 2025 I will have done this. So it's kind of a long-term project. I'm in for the long haul. But actually, I just want people, for me, my life started with being physically active. It wasn't about sport. It wasn't about elite sport. My life now as a retired athlete is about being physically active because I'm getting older and things are starting to hurt. And, actually, I kind of want people to have a positive experience and enjoy it as much as I do. And, that's what we should try and do.
Well, I guess it must have helped you because you seem as though you're a machine going from, when I look at what you do, it's like, well, how have you got enough time in your day? Maybe that's that time thing. You just pack it all in. But I guess your general fitness level must allow you to keep that kind of crazy schedule.
The more active I have built into my day, the more that I can do. Absolutely believe it. And I have a really good diary manager. But genuinely, I think more clearly. The time that I go out on my bike is when I just sort out all the problems that I'm dealing with that day. For me, I definitely perform better when I'm active. So it's not rocket science. It's there in my life.
It works, definitely. So final question, Tanni. Escape Your Limits is about escaping what other people or even yourself have said is impossible and gone on to make it possible. What would be, and we've covered a lot here, but what would be a memorable example of you escaping your own personal limits?
Oh, there's loads. So actually, it comes back to that sort of Venn diagram, the circles of where I am. So, I'm a mum and a wife, and I'm a sister, and I'm a parliamentarian, a politician, and an ex-athlete, and I'm Welsh, and I'm all those things. So in each of those, I've had people say to me, well, you can't do that because you're a woman, you can't do that because you're disabled, you can't do that because you're Welsh. So I think it's kind of knocking back on all of those things. Actually, a really important lesson I learned, one coach said to me when I was competing, you can't be an athlete and a mother, because having a baby will make you soft and you will never come back to the level that you were before. So my response to him is, which is the bit that I've learned from, which is, let me stick a bowling ball inside you, slash it out with a knife, and see if you're training 2 weeks later. I got told off for that, yeah, it's people. If people are really happy to tell other people about what they shouldn't do, and I think what my parents taught me to do is just ignore most of it, for good or bad.
Yeah, I think that's a great lesson there. So Tanni, I appreciate your time today. You really are an inspiration. You certainly inspire me and made me feel I've got a lot more to do in my life. So thank you so much, and
Thank you.
Let's hope we can continue to support you and the causes that you're going after. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.